Very welcome this evening to Keeping Well and Warm workshop, part of the winter workshop series. Delighted you could all make it. Just to introduce myself, my name is Fiona and I am a sustainability consultant. I work alongside the Southeast Energy Agency and we work on the Sustainable Energy Communities programme along with Avril. Just a quick reminder before we move into our workshop that the third workshop in the series is going to be on the 28th of November at 7 p.m. and it's going to be all about energy saving light bulbs. So keep an eye out for an email so that you can register for the event if this is something that you're interested in finding more about. So for the workshop this evening, we really wanted to cover as much as we could to bring value and something of interest to everyone that might be tuned in this evening. It's kind of a whistle-stop tour of lots of different things, but then we point you in the direction of where you can go or who you might speak to find out a little bit more information. So particularly this evening, we're going to help you understand how you can reduce your heating costs, hear ideas about how to create a warmer and more comfortable home, find some cheap and easy ways to warm your home and then keep it warm, and know what home energy grants are available to you for maybe some more advanced improvements that you're interested in carrying out in your house. So in terms of keeping well and warm, the idea of that is that we're helping you reduce your home energy costs while also improving home comfort levels. So that's really the idea of keeping well and warm. And when we look at heating your home, we might use terms like efficient or cost effective. And when we use these terms, it really means that we're exploring ways to use your heating, your lighting, or your appliances in such a way that they use less energy for the same result or better. And if you're using less energy, this means that you're reducing your energy costs. So how we all heat our home varies from home to home. You might have one primary system or you might have two systems. So at the very top, we have heat pumps. So this is probably the most modern technology that we have at the moment. It's a renewable heating system that runs on electricity. The more traditional that most homes have are the oil and gas boilers. Depending on where you live, you'll probably have, if you have mains gas in the area, then you probably have a gas, and otherwise you probably have the oil tank. After that, we have stoves. Stoves became really popular, I guess, in maybe the last 7 or 8 years. They run on solid fuel. Sometimes they're just standalone units, but actually we've come across more and more homes that have a back boiler system for heating possibly some radiators downstairs and also heating their hot water. There's also still a lot of open fires, again, running on solid fuel. And again, some with the back boiler still in place that might be for some heating downstairs or hot water. We also do come across some homes or apartments that have storage heaters or electric heaters, and both of these are running on electricity. So these are just kind of like a heating checklist, depending on what kind of heating system you have, things that you can look at or consider. So we'll start with heat pumps. So the very first thing is we find a lot of people have had heat pumps installed, but they don't really understand how they work or how to use them. So the first thing is check that you have a clear instruction manual and that you understand how to use it. The answer is no to either of the above. We recommend you contact your installer and look for some support. There is a website or there's a link there on to SAI, and there's a lot of information there on your guide to your heat pump. So even if you're interested in getting a heat pump, there's a really good, quite detailed homeowner guide that's worth checking out. If you have an oil or a gas boiler, really important that you arrange for your boiler to be serviced every year. And what this does is it increases its efficiency, and it means it's going to use less fuel to heat your home. We also recommend you bleed your radiators on a regular basis to remove airlocks. It's quite easy to do. You just need an Allen key. And if you're unsure how to do it, you can either ask for help or again, you could check YouTube, which is a really great place to find some handy information out there. By bleeding your radiators, you're removing the airlocks, and it just means that the whole radiator is able to get hot and heat your room as best as it can. For older heating systems, for maybe older homes, we recommend you could talk to your plumber about having your radiators desludged. So if you find within your home you have radiators that are only ever lukewarm, regardless of how high you're turning them up, or if they stay quite cold along the bottom, that could be a sign that there is sludge building up in your system, and you can arrange to have that desludged. Moving on to our stove, one of the things to check is the rope seal on the door around the stove, or the door of the stove, just to check the rope seal on a fairly regular basis and arrange for it to be replaced when needed. So it's probably from a health point of view, make sure that there isn't any of the smoke coming into the room, but also it means that it's just more efficient as a system, the more sealed that door can be. They do say on a yearly basis, but if you're only using it from time to time, maybe every 2 years is fine. You can just check with a local chimney sweep and ask them. One of the things with stoves that we find is that some people are trying to make it work as as hard as it can to heat possibly the downstairs, so they tend to load it up with quite a lot of fuel. What happens is if you overheat your stove, it becomes so hot that the minute you throw something in, it's burnt up so quickly without really getting the maximum benefit of it. One way to make sure that your stove is working really efficiently is to get a stove thermometer, and they're actually really cheap. They're only about €8 or €9. And what you want to do is to keep the temperature of your stove between 260 and 460 degrees to make sure that it's giving as much heat as you need, but minimizing the amount of fuel that it needs to do that. And you can talk to your installer actually about the different types of fuel that are out there for your stove and what is the best value that they can recommend. We're seeing more and more different products coming onto the market, so I think a little bit of homework is well worth doing just to find out the best ones that are out there. Looking at your open fire, arrange for your chimney to be swept every 1 to 2 years. And again, like the stove, how often you do it really does depend on how often you use it. It's just good to make sure that your fire is working properly in terms of giving heat out to the room, but also just from a safety point of view, it's a good one to do. Ironically, in terms of heating with the open fire, you need to make sure there's enough oxygen for the fire to burn. So you need to just check your room vents and make sure that they're open. By making sure there's enough oxygen in the room, your fire will actually burn better. And again, like the stove, I do recommend you look at the different fire fuel options that are out there with your local supplier and possibly play around with them. I do just want to note for both the open fire and the stove, we do recommend dry wood and dry wood products as much as possible. They're best from an efficiency point of view, but also from an environmental perspective and from a health point of view in terms of the particulates that it releases. Then just moving on to our storage heaters. So the way they work is that they store heat at night and they give it out during the day. They can be quite an economical way, or they would have traditionally been considered economical because they would have used heat at night on a night rate. So it was a cheaper rate of electricity that they were using. If you have a storage heater, make sure that you have a night rate with your electricity provider to avail of the cheaper electricity rate. You also need to check that they're set at the correct time, that your heater knows when it's daytime and when it's nighttime. And check the input and the output dial. So the input dial is really how much energy it's using to generate heat, and the output dial is really how quickly it releases that heat into the room that it's in. So what we suggest is that you set the input dial at a low of 1 or 2 during milder months when you don't actually need a lot of heat. But during winter months, especially now, I've noticed just the last week or so is starting to get quite cold. You want to have it high at around 5 or 6 during these kind of periods. Then looking at your output dial, you're putting it to a 1 for slow or gradual heat throughout the day, or a high of 5 or 6 if you want all the heat to come out in the earliest part of the day. The important thing to remember here is if you are gone during the day and you're at home in the evening, you want to make sure that there's still heat coming from your storage heater. So you're better off putting it down to a 1 and having that slow gradual heat so you're still benefiting when you're home in the evening time. Looking at electric heaters, whether they're plug-in or they're fixed, try as much as possible to make sure that there's a timer fixed to it so that the heat isn't left on for too long. You'd be surprised if you're in the room, you won't realise how hot it's gotten, or you just might forget to turn it back off. And a lot of the plug-in electric heaters, you'll know, have thermostats, and it's a great way of making sure that it doesn't overheat. And with thermostats, we always recommend for heating that you set it to a maximum of 20 degrees Celsius. Just to mention here, it's really important that everyone has a carbon monoxide alarm if you have a fuel burning appliance in your home. And there's a good website here where you can go to find out more information about that. So just looking at your radiators and heating controls. So this is just a handy checklist for radiators. Move furniture that's blocking radiators. Seems like a small, easy thing to do, although it depends on your room and how much furniture is there, but it makes a massive difference. It really does. If you find there's a room that you're really struggling to heat, moving furniture from in front of the radiator will make a big difference. I notice even in my own home, and when I visit other people's homes, I often notice that the couch is sitting in front of the main radiator, and it's often just the way the room is designed. So again, if you find there's rooms that you're struggling to heat, just try and move any of the furniture, even pull it out as much as you can. As I mentioned earlier, bleeding and desludging radiators can make a really big difference. And for some of the older systems, placing radiator foil on the wall behind your radiators is a great thing to do, especially if the radiators run on the outside walls of your home. So that means the walls, the exterior walls of your house that are actually facing to the outside. Not so you won't really gain the benefit for the interior walls that are just separating rooms, but definitely for those external walls, especially if you have limited wall insulation. So if you haven't had any additional insulation added in the last 10 years, is worth considering. The radiator foil is very cheap, it's very easy to use. You just buy it in rolls, slips in behind the radiator and sticks to the wall. Looking at your heating controls, it's important for everyone to make sure they understand how their heating controls use or work. The more you can control your heating, the more savings that you can make, and also make sure that there's greater comfort in your home. Make sure the timer is set to only heat your home or your hot water when you are home, and upgrade your heating controls is well worth considering if you have very limited controls, and there is a grant available with SAI, so it is worth checking out. Just a little bit more on the heating controls. Like a lot of things, there's a huge range of options out there in terms of if you look at them from a cost point of view and from saving opportunities. But that's how I've listed these. So the time clock is probably the most basic and the simple one. It's probably also the most popular that we see out there. It's very easy to use and it is very cheap to buy, but the money saving opportunities are probably more limited. You also have manual room thermostats. That's really where you have a thermostat that you can put in each room and you can set what is the maximum temperature that you want that room to heat. Again, they're quite cheap to buy, but there's greater money saving opportunities because you're making sure that you're not overheating your rooms. The thermostatic radiator valves are very popular. We do see them in a lot of homes, and it's really just that's the dial at the side of your radiator to turn it up or down. Again, the cost is low, but you do have significant money saving opportunities, especially if you're able to turn it down in areas that are very low occupancy, where there isn't a lot of people there during the day, or maybe there's just periods where the rooms aren't being used at all. You then have your programmable room thermostats. They're a little bit more expensive, but there's again a higher opportunity to save money. The reason being is you can control not just the temperature, but the times that the temperatures are set. So you could decide at night that it's going to be a maximum of 15. During the day when you're at work, you could have it again at 15, and then for the periods when you're home in the evening that you can put it back up again, or if there's periods in the morning where a room is going to be used. So you just have greater control. So again, it's money saving opportunities, but it's also a comfort, bringing more comfort for the times that you're going to be there. Then you have your smart heating controls, and some of you may have these kind of systems, so you hear them in terms of Climate, Hive, and they are probably the best type of heating controls that you can have out there at the moment. They'll do your heating and your hot water. You'll have time and temperature control for the whole house, so that's every room in your house. You'll have your hot water control, you'll have a digital panel, and in most cases you have an app, so you'll actually be able to control it with your phone remotely. The cost is higher, but your money saving opportunities are also much higher. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a grant from SAI that will go towards heating controls, and you can check out their website for more information on that. You can also go to your local suppliers to find out about the different types of heating controls, what one would suit you best, what the cost would be, and what those money saving opportunities would be. Looking again just at the heating controls and room temperatures. So the table here, what it shows is the ideal temperatures for the different rooms in your home. The temperatures will bring comfort, but they'll also help you manage your heating costs. So the likes of your kitchen and your sitting room that have high occupancy tend to be the busiest rooms in any house. You're looking at around 18 to 20 degrees. Your hall or your landing isn't an area that people tend to just be passing through, so you're keeping that at around 16 or 18 degrees. Bedrooms, actually, they say 18 degrees, slightly lower temperature are supposed to aid sleep. And then the bathroom around 18 to 20 degrees at times of occupancy. And again, that's often to do with the condensation that's generated from the hot water, and it just makes sure that it doesn't settle and cause mold and damp issues in your bathroom. But one thing we do always say with this is they're best temperatures for typical households, but you really do need to consider the needs of all the different people in your home. So there may be requirement for different rooms to have them at a higher temperature, but each of you will know that for yourselves in terms of understanding the needs of the people in your home. So just looking at our hot water, a good rule of thumb when it comes to anything to do with energy and cost is if there's anything in your house that heats or cools, it's using a lot of energy and it's more expensive to run. The next thing you need to consider is how often and how long you're using that appliance for. So what does this mean in terms of hot water? Electric showers are definitely the most expensive appliance in your home. At the moment, electricity is more expensive than oil and gas. And the other reason electric showers are so expensive is they have an unlimited supply of hot water. So there isn't a lot of encouragement to keep your showers short. So how can you make your savings? Reducing shower times, but that's definitely easier said than done. There is the option of possibly switching to mains hot water, and I'll talk a little bit more about that now on the next slide. So just knowing when this is a good idea If you find you've quite a high demand, and again, this is to do with the number of people living in your home, we do find if there is homes where there's a lot of people who are playing sports, there's a lot more showers being had, you have a high water demand, it may be worth considering switching to your mains hot water. Also looking at the efficiency of your boiler. So if the efficiency of your boiler is quite good, if it's more than 75%, and you can check with your boiler or with your plumber to find this out, it's well worth considering doing that. Again, one of the benefits of using your mains hot water in your hot water tank is it is not unlimited, so it means that everyone has to keep their showers just that little bit shorter, although it might be challenging for the person who's last in line for the shower. If you have a water only option on your heating controls is the other thing to consider. So in some cases you may be able to, during the summer periods, rather than using your immersion, you could use your boiler, but it's only heating your water, it's not heating your home. But again, that just depends on hot water demand, the efficiency of your boiler, and how much hot water you need in your home. When electricity continues to be more expensive than oil and gas, this is worthwhile. But if there is a lot happening in the energy market at the moment, so if suddenly we find that gas and oil become much more expensive, you're better off switching back to possibly your electric shower and or your immersion, but just trying to keep the showers as short as possible. And then just some final hot water tips. Consider upgrading your heating controls if you don't have a hot water only option. Install a timer for your immersion if your immersion is primarily what you're using to heat water in your home. Ensure both your hot water tank and your pipes are insulated. If you open up your hot press and it's lovely and warm, it means you're losing heat, which means you're also losing money. It's also worth fitting a thermostat to your hot water tank to make sure you're not overheating your water. Repairing dripping hot water taps, you'd be surprised how quickly you'll empty your tank or significantly reduce it by just having leaking taps. You can also look at replacing your shower head with a water saving model, which they say can reduce up to 40%. And switch to aerated sink taps if you have a lot of sinks in your home. So one of the examples I was thinking of here is if you run a bed and breakfast possibly all year round or during the summer, you have a high water demand. So looking at that for your shower or for your sinks is well worth exploring. So getting your house to warm up is one thing and getting it nice warm, but then keeping that heat in is another. So here's just a few tips and ideas on how to do that. Replacing worn or damaged rubber and brush seals on your front and back doors really does make a massive difference. You'd be surprised how quickly just small little cracks around the door will actually just draw all the heat out of your home. You can also have your windows serviced to repair the damaged seals, or if the opening and closing mechanism isn't working terribly well. If your house is a newer house and you are having issues with your window, you can go back to whoever installed it, and often there's a service within, it depends on who has installed it, but possibly up to 10 years, but they will service it for free, so you can make that inquiry. We also recommend you close your curtains in the evenings. Blinds won't keep in the heat the same way curtains will. Curtains will just seal the whole frame of the window, so if you have curtains, definitely close them in the evening. Hanging curtains on the inside of your front and back doors is also a great idea. It tends to be, they're the two areas where you lose heat probably the quickest in your home. Heavy and lined if possible. Now, one of the things I'd say about curtains is, especially the heavy and lined, they're not necessarily that cheap. They can be quite expensive, and they do get a lot of wear and tear in the front and back doors. And actually, I've noticed charity shops have now become a great place for getting curtains, those type of curtains, the older curtains maybe, and they're well worth checking out. If you have just traditional heating system or you have your open fire, keeping internal doors closed. So the rooms that have high occupancy, just keeping the doors closed to the rooms that aren't really being used. The only time you might do the opposite, and I do hear a lot of people say that if they have a stove and if it's a pretty efficient stove that's giving out plenty of heat, by opening up the doors, you're allowing that heat just to travel around all of downstairs and heat lots of the rooms. So it just depends on your home and your heating systems. Just a little tip here, and I wish I had known this when I was in college, but I would always have considered the hot water bottle to be the most cost-effective way of, if you find it very cold at night when you're going to bed. But actually, the cost of heating the water for one hot water bottle costs the same as having your electric blanket on for 3.5 hours. So that might be good news for some people out there. And getting woolly this winter, these are just the last few tips that I have for this evening. And it's kind of going back to the very practical things that we all did growing up that we probably don't maybe practice or follow as much as we used to. So in winter, it's really all about the layers. So with our clothes, it's layering up so that we can take on and off as we need. It's getting woolly this winter. So bring out the jumpers, the cardigans, the hats, the scarves. Adding extra blankets to your bed for the winter makes such a difference. And then just keeping some blankets in the sitting room for getting cozy on the couch. One of the things we find, and I worked in businesses and obviously with our community, so we're looking at home settings as well. We all have our own individual, almost like body temperatures. So you'll have some people who just never feel the cold. And then you have other people who really, really do feel the cold. And I would probably be one of those people. So what we say when we make those recommendations for room temperatures, that's really the ideal temperature. If you find you are more on the cold side, it's really just about layering up. If you're heating your office or your home based on the coldest person in the house, you're overheating your home and you're using a lot of energy. So it's just trying to think of small little practical things that you can do to just manage that. And just with the home energy grants, we're not going to talk about it too much this evening because there's going to be lots more information coming in the new year around that. And I think, Avril, you're going to share a link there for everyone to click into and check out some more information. There's lots of different options and routes depending on your needs and depending on what your spending capacity is. So it's worth just checking out all the different options. And as I said, as part of this workshop series, there's going to be lots more information coming in the new year.